She never thought a single letter could change her entire life. Maya was a quiet woman, graceful, kind, and married to a man everyone thought was perfect. But deep inside, she felt like a guest in her own life. Her husband Rohan was successful, respected, but distant. Their conversations had turned into routines. Their laughter faded into polite smiles, and their hearts, though under the same roof, had started living in different worlds. Maya's days were filled with chores, work, and endless silences that echoed louder than words. But all of that began to change the day she met Arav. Arav was nothing like her husband. He was younger, free-spirited, and carried a spark that made people feel seen. He worked as a freelance photographer and had recently moved into the neighborhood. Their first meeting wasn't anything special. She had dropped her groceries, and he helped her pick them up with a warm smile. But there was something in his eyes, something that didn't look at her like the world did. It wasn't pity, it wasn't admiration. It was understanding. The kind of understanding that can pull the strongest walls down, brick by brick. Days passed, and Maya found herself noticing small things, like how Arav always carried his camera, but never took pictures without asking, how he listened with genuine curiosity, and how he made ordinary things feel extraordinary. They started talking, first about simple things, the weather, the street, the noise of the city, but slowly their conversations drifted deeper into life, dreams, regrets, and all the things they wished they had done differently. Maya began to laugh again. For the first time in years, she felt alive, not because of love, but because someone finally saw her as a person, not a duty. Yet, every time she smiled, guilt whispered in her heart. She was married. She had vows, a home, a husband who, though distant, had never wronged her. But emotions aren't bound by logic. They sneak in quietly, blur lines, and before she knew it, she started waiting for the moments she could see Arav again. It wasn't love, not yet. It was comfort, connection, a reflection of what she had lost long ago. But life has a way of testing people at their most fragile moments. One evening, after an argument with her husband, about something as small as a dinner plan, she sat by her desk, tears blurring her vision. She opened her diary, the only place she ever spoke freely, and wrote a letter she never meant to send. In that letter, she poured her heart out, how she felt unseen, how she missed feeling alive, and how someone new reminded her what it meant to be herself again. She wrote about Arav, not in the way one confesses love, but in the way one confesses loneliness. It was raw, emotional, and painfully honest. When she finished, she folded the letter and slipped it inside an envelope, thinking she'd burn it later. But fate had its own plans. The next morning, she accidentally placed the letter among her outgoing mail. By the time she realized, it was too late. The letter had been sent to Arav. The days that followed were torture. Every time the doorbell rang, her heart raced. Every time her phone buzzed, she froze. She wanted to disappear. What if he misunderstood? What if he told someone? What if her husband found out? She avoided the street, the park, even the grocery store. But silence didn't last long. 3 days later, there was a knock on her door. Arav stood there, holding that letter, folded neatly, unread. He smiled softly. "You dropped this," he said, handing it to her. "I didn't read it. I figured if it was meant for me, you'd have said it in person." Her eyes filled with tears. Not because she was caught, but because he had respected her silence. In that moment, she realized the truth. What she felt wasn't romantic desire. It was gratitude. Gratitude for being seen without judgment, for being heard without expectation. Arav smiled again and said, "Whatever you're going through, I hope you find peace. Sometimes, people come into our lives, not to stay, but to remind us who we are. After that day, they drifted apart naturally. Maya focused on her marriage, but something inside her changed. She stopped waiting for Rohan to make her happy. Instead, she started doing small things that made her feel alive again. Painting, volunteering, reconnecting with old friends. Slowly, the walls between her and her husband began to crack. Not from destruction, but from light seeping in. Months later, one quiet night, Rohan found her painting near the window. He hadn't seen her smile like that in years. "You've changed," he said softly. She looked at him and replied, "No, I just remembered who I used to be." That night, they talked for hours. Really talked. About life. About how they'd lost each other in the noise. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was a beginning. A year later, while visiting an art exhibition, Maya saw a photograph displayed in the corner. A simple image of a woman's shadow standing by a window, sunlight touching her hand. Below it was a title, "The Letter She Never Sent." The photographer's name, Erev. Her eyes welled up. He had never read her letter, yet somehow he captured the story it carried. The quiet ache, the beauty of restraint, and the power of letting go. Maya smiled, not out of regret, but gratitude, because some people enter your life like storms, loud, chaotic, unforgettable, but others arrive like quiet rain, washing away the dust, leaving you clean, whole, and new. Her story wasn't about betrayal or forbidden love. It was about rediscovery, about how sometimes losing yourself in someone's eyes isn't about love, but about remembering your own reflection. And in that realization, she found peace. Years later, she would often look at that photograph online. It had become one of Arav's most acclaimed works. People wrote comments like, "This picture feels like a story I've lived." And they were right, because everyone at some point has written a letter they never sent. To someone who changed them quietly, profoundly, without ever asking for anything in return. Maya learned that love isn't always about possession, grand gestures, or even staying together. Sometimes it's about the courage to feel, to heal, and to move forward with grace. And that was her real love story. Not one the world would gossip about, but one that lived silently in her heart, long after the ink had dried.